Welcome to the WriterDojo with your host, Steve Diamond.
That's me.
And Larry Correia.
Ladies and gentlemen, the story you're about to hear is true. Only the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
Today's episode, Law Enforcement with Griffin Barber.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the WriterDojo. Glad to have you all back with us today in our apparently never-ending string of interviews that we've conducted at LibertyCon, because we don't know exactly in which order these are going to air throughout the season, but we were here. It's like awesome author mecca out here, and so we're just getting anybody and everybody up here for recording.
Dude, I'm so tired.
Larry and I are both smoked right now. Larry, on this specific day, is the day in which Larry ran Gritty Cop Show for charity, raised an absolute butt ton of money.
Yep, record amount of money for Ronald McDonald House.
Which is freaking rad.
Pretty awesome.
So freaking rad. And then I'm just tired because I'm always tired. That's my secret. Okay, today we have a guy on the show who is a mutual friend of mine and Larry's, a guy we both love to death, and a guy we've been wanting to have on the show for a long time, not because he whines at us every other week. I mean, it's like every 3 weeks that he whines at us.
Which is actually not bad ratio for us.
No, it's not too shabby. All right, our guest today is Griff Barber, one of our guys. I think, man, Griff, I think you and I actually met physically for the first time at that
SpikeCon.
It was SpikeCon, right? 2019?
Yep.
And we ended up sitting across from each other, just pure happenstance. And I don't know what happened. I don't know how it happened, but you and I just started chatting, and it was like immediately we just kind of clicked. We were like, "Oh, hey, you're actually pretty all right."
Well, I've known Griff actually for a surprisingly long time, because we first met at the Reno WorldCon way back in ye olde times.
No, you were there
Reals.
too?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was the one that we carpooled to.
But the reason I wound up meeting Griff there was because you were one of the handful of sane people.
No.
And this is before you were a writer.
Despite no, I was a writer, but I wasn't a published author.
Yeah, so you weren't a published author yet.
Actually, I was a published author, not for fiction.
Okay, so you're a published author. Yep. So you were new to the fiction world,
yep.
And it was a very bunch of squirrely people who all hated my guts.
Yeah.
And I found a couple guys who were actually legit cool and normal. And
we all kind of hated ourselves because of all the gambling machine noise in the background from Reno.
Yeah, so we actually wound up talking quite a bit that
I
year.
had no idea you were at that one too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was you, and you had a couple friends that were like normal dudes, and so it was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
I just remember we were vaguely threatening to one of the other people there. We all showed up onto this elevator. I'm not going to say his name. We showed up onto this elevator, and Larry's fairly tall. I'm super average, but this guy's really short.
Well,
and so
we
we
were
all
Dave Butler, who's huge.
Dave Butler. We all towered over him, and the immediate comment we made was, "Hey, want to come see our shovel and tarp collection?"
Out in the desert.
In the desert.
Out in the desert, yeah.
And his eyes get all big. Anyway, okay, that's a different story for a different time. Point is, we're here with Griff Barber, a really good friend of ours, a guy we both love. Griff, we need you to introduce yourself, tell us what you come from, background, your writing, what you do, and, plug yourself.
So I'm Griffin Barber. I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, in the late 70s and early 80s and that kind of thing. But I grew up mostly there, but I also lived in Canada. I lived in Switzerland, lived in Spain. I speak 3 languages. I came back to the States and wasted a lot of my father's money on colleges that I didn't complete, and went through and tried to figure out what I was going to do, and decided to join the San Francisco Police Department. I was there for 20 years, from 2000 to 2020. And was medically retired because of a back injury from that date, more or less. It's been kind of an odyssey getting there. But I've been a lifelong science fiction fantasy fan. David Drake was my constant companion when I was overseas, because it was something I could read. It was American, yet it was also international, and he's an amazing writer.
He's amazing.
I love Dave Drake stuff.
Redliners was, something I read quite a bit about and read of and really enjoyed. but also there was a English language bookstore, Elm Books, ELM, English Language Media, that you could get your books in Geneva, and I'm not sure if it still exists. I doubt it, given the nature of things. But that was where I picked up on Pornell, Niven, all the goodies of that era, Mercedes Lackey and the Vaniel series, all that stuff. So graduated, came here, got into law enforcement, and kind of looked around and saw that there weren't a whole lot of people getting it right. And I want to get it right. I want to help other authors get it right. And there are people that have all sorts of use of force and concealed carry experience. I mean, Larry teaches classes and has taught senators and et cetera.
Yeah, but I'm coming at it from a cake-eating civilian perspective.
Right, and each of us comes from our state perspective, that kind of thing. But I've tried to make a study of it nationally, at least a little bit. And just, simply one of my favorite scenes in any movie is in Snatch, when the guy discharges the blank firearm inside the car and blows the windows out and everybody wants to murder him. Because everybody shoots from their cars in the Hollywood movies. And that is a really good way to go really deaf, really fast. and to have exactly the response they did while sitting still, let alone driving in a high-speed pursuit or, leaning out the window, that kind of stuff. And I've had personal experiences, not of shootings, but of like where the evidence ends up of a shooting. Because we had two guys going at each other. Anyway, lots of stuff like that. In the intro of this, I've also written, co-authored several historical fiction books or alternate history books with Eric Flint, 1636 Mission to the Mughal, 1637 The Peacock Throne. I'm working on 1637 The Pilgrim's Passage, which I decided to play around a little bit with because it's the Hajj, not our traditional idea of the Pilgrim's Passage in the Western sense. I also co-authored with Casey Azell, who I think is I know she's a big fan of this show, and you guys are fans of her as well.
Oh yeah,
big time.
Who's
Huge
going
fan.
to? She and I wrote Second Chance Angel, which was very well received by critical folks, but it happened to come out in September of 2020 amid 500 other science fiction novels in that 1 week.
Well, and I mean, not just that, but in a really rough time for any book to come out.
Well, that's normally there are 500 in a month.
Yeah.
And it was 500 in 1 week.
Jeez.
So it was pretty intense.
Actually,
That book has a gorgeous cover.
that's a really good cover.
Yeah, and that's in-house
gosh.
artist too. That wasn't like they hired a guy out. This is a graphic designer.
A bunch of like listeners have already bought like my noir anthologies. So if you guys pick those up, if you've already got those, Griffin's in there. You're in Noir Fatale.
Yep.
And you were in the third one, I believe. But that's not out yet, so that's down these main streets.
I'm in all three of them.
Oh, that's where you're in the second one.
you're in
In the
game,
first one, it's my own
That's
epic
right.
fantasy character, a necromancer who feeds on the living. It's a heist story.
Yeah, it was.
called
It was.
A Goddess in Red.
That was a good story.
Yeah.
So which one did you do in the second one? I'm trying to
And the
remember.
second one, I did it with Casey. We wrote
That's
Second
right.
Chance Angel. It's the prequel for Muck.
with the bouncer.
Muck.
And it's kind of like gritty detective, cyberpunk kind of sci-fi. Yeah, okay, because I forgot that one because you had co-written that one with Casey,
Yes.
who was the co-editor. So yeah,
Yep.
Yeah, so you've been in all three. So you actually.
I'm glad to do more.
So me, you,
Right?
Casey, and actually the only other person that's been in all three is Laurel K. Hamilton.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty
I
cool.
know. I didn't even get in all three.
No, Steve is not.
Yes, just so you know, the look I'm getting, it's not pleasant.
I'm only in 1 and
I think
3.
the diamond comes from the hard glance. There we go.
Yeah, no. So Griffin's you're a talented writer, man.
Well, thank you. I
You've got some
appreciate
skills, and I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch more of your stuff.
And I've written a couple of stories in zombie anthologies for the Black Tide Rising universe.
right.
I'm in 2 of those. And actually, it's kind of funny because Casey's like, you really ought to put Griffin in the first one or in the second one. So they did, but they dropped her.
Oh,
So I was like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Ouch! Dang.
But it's the nature of anthologies, for sure.
It is. It's
There's
so
only
hard.
so much room, especially for the mid-list folks.
Yeah, the space is so limited, and it's all about fitting in what fits, and sometimes it's a good story, but it's just not the right story for the fit.
Absolutely. So so we ended up doing that. Casey and I wrote for No Game for Knights. We wrote the No Faint Hearts, which is again the story about the bouncer from Muck. From Second Chance Angel. I have written a bunch of stuff, co-authored it with Mike Massa, Chuck Gannon. In Chuck Gannon's universe, the Kane Riordan universe, it's the Lost Soldiers Annex, I like to call it, although I'm not sure if that's the official title or not, documenting some guys that are put into cryosleep after escaping Mogadishu in 91 and find themselves on an alien planet. And the character I made up is the only one of all of them who's happy about it. He dodged a bullet, an investigation by the Defense Department of his actions and character in Mogadishu, selling arms to people he shouldn't have been selling arms to.
Oh, okay. So him getting frozen is convenient.
Yes, it's like, I dodged this bullet. I'm so happy about it. And he's an Army investigator, so he's kind of in that role. So he's able to cover for himself, and he has a partner who is more or less a straight arrow, but that's my partner. I'm going to take care of him.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of the lean. I lean heavily on my law enforcement experience for that, and how to kind of bring that up.
Yes.
Well, whenever we have anyone on the show, before the show, we always kind of chat around. Sometimes it's really easy to arrive at a subject. Hey, let's talk about this. In this case, Larry and I were talking with Griff, and we're like, hey man, like, what do you want to talk about? What is it that you're super passionate about, or that, man, just hyper bugs you, or, maybe it's a little bit of both. And the one thing that, that kind of easily came to mind for you was law enforcement.
Right.
I mean, and you've talked about it, you've hinted at it. It's super prevalent in your writing already. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about law enforcement, what people get wrong, why they get it wrong, but also nuts and bolts of, man, this is how you can fix this and get this crap right.
Because this is a common thing we actually see a lot in books, and this is a pet peeve of Steve's, because Steve comes from a cop family.
Yeah, well, in fact, this was, I think, the really early seed. One
of the reasons you guys...
Why Griff and I really get along. Something cop-oriented came up, and we were both like, oh, no, you don't mess with that kind of thing.
Because there's a lot of writers who get this stuff really wrong.
Yeah.
So,
and indeed, it's not necessarily a fault of not trying, but perhaps they didn't ask the right questions to the right individuals. Most officers, especially prior to the recent unpleasant 2020, 2021, were more than happy to explain why it is that what they're seeing on TV is actually lawful. It's lawful but awful, but it's lawful. And why are everybody screaming about it? Well, it's because it's awful looking. And the application of violence should be, to most people, very frequently, it's going to be offensive because it's violence. And we have been encouraged, and we have been inculcated with, oh, wow, this is fun to, shoot somebody in the game or whatever it might be. We are all inured to a certain level of violence. To see the actual perpetration of violence on a person, especially when it is cut into little chunks to perhaps serve a narrative, or perhaps to try to avoid offending certain sensibilities. Yeah.
Usually served up bereft of context.
Correct. And context is difficult. It is because a context for me with 23 years in my law enforcement career is going to be different for you.
Yep.
And it's going to be different for a guy that's got only 5 years in law enforcement.
Right.
And it'll be different for somebody who has experience in a combat zone, if it's a lethal engagement. Whereas, I've never been in the military, and I don't have that experience of being in a combat zone, but I have been in a lot of fights. And I have the scars to prove it, and that kind of thing.
He just took off his shirt. It's crazy.
Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that in here. But the experience level and engagement that you get out of folks one of the things I was taught in the academy and that I learned early on was people have different thresholds for A, observing the threat,
Okay.
and B, understanding what they observed. Mm-hmm. And these often lag behind each other and can lag significantly after the event or never happen. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I knew he was going for a gun. I don't know why I knew he was going to attack me. But one of the blessings, and there's mixed blessings of this, threats and blessings, of the video age is we can actually watch. And we can watch their subconscious responses to what their subconscious is seeing.
Okay.
So the suspect, say, comes out of the car, and he's squaring up. His shoulders are across. He's making a T of his person. But then one of his right leg comes back. This is telling me, with my years of experience, he is aggressive and he's trained. Because his right leg's gone back, his right foot is out, cocked out at a 45-degree angle. He is ready to move forward or move backwards. It's all fencing stuff, which can be portrayed in, your Son of the Sword series. You look at it and you see it. Now, I may not be able to process that until I get back to the station. Or if I'm very experienced, I may immediately go, threat, and I'm out of the holster. And the guy who's standing next to me, who has 6 months of experience, who just got out of the academy, is like, why are you bang, bang, bang? And I've already acted. I've already addressed the threat that I perceived, and that they are barely registering before it even happens.
Well, yeah, because they don't even know what they don't know yet when it comes to threat assessment, and what I guess what it comes down to is there's only so much you can learn in a classroom or in an academy setting, right? My dad was over the academy for the Sacramento Sheriff's Department,
right?
And so he would always talk about, and I would go out there and I would, because I was a stupid kid, I was like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to show up all the cops, because I was doing all the running and stuff. So I would run and do things with them, and I spoke a tiny bit of Spanish, not like you and I both do now. Although I think your Spanish is much better than mine now.
Thank you.
Because you've used it so much more than I have lately. But
not lately.
Well, not lately, but I mean more recently for sure. Good
Absolutely.
grief. And there was a lot of times where they just didn't understand how to process even the most basic challenge or like a negative challenge to their command.
Right.
Right. And so I always found it very interesting that. And so to take that a step further, it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, you passed the academy, nifty. Anyone can take a freaking test.
Right.
And they can get through it. So now the next key is, when confronted with some sort of said perpetrator or a suspected perpetrator of any X number of crimes, their ability to, a lot of these guys, it's not their first time being a dirtbag.
Well, they also have had their experiences that train them to behave in a certain way.
Well,
Yeah,
however,
they went to the criminals academy
however
and they
good- yeah.
graduated with flying colors.
It's their job, and so it's however good you are at your career.
Or it's not. Or they're their first time offender, but they've been beefing with their dad their whole life.
Oh, yeah.
So here comes the authority figure who is ultimately dad, and they are going to respond in the same way that they would respond to their dad. And if their dad is a trained fighter, they may be, their responses may be all out of turn. It's not necessarily that but they are highly motivated.
Yep.
And often unaware of consequence.
Correct.
But on the flip side of that also is that the young officers, beyond, and this is not a slag on anybody or anything like that, but the younger generation of folks is not as used to putting their hands on someone.
Correct.
And that is a huge component of law enforcement. You have to be willing to, and not just able, but willing to engage in putting your hands on somebody. And not even just to throw down and, to get in the fight, but to search them, bodily search somebody. It's intimate.
Oh, yeah.
You're in there going, squeezing all the parts.
Yeah, you're getting to third base.
Correct. And it's not for everybody.
Right.
And one of the difficulties that we've encountered, or I never trained because I have a hot temper and I didn't want to unduly influence or get somebody fired for not doing the smart thing when I have all this experience and stuff. But what I would do, and I always offered to do with my lieutenants, was, hey, once they get on probation, bring them with me, put them with me. I'll talk to them, because it's one thing to be on training, it's another thing to be on probation. And the single biggest thing they need to be taught is, no matter how much you love the job, no matter what job it is, but certainly in law enforcement, no matter how much you love it, it will never love you back. It will never love you back. So when you get into the deep doo-doo and you're swimming for your life, and not the actual incident, the fighting for your life, the having to shoot somebody, but the what comes after, the court case, the paperwork, all that stuff. When you're sitting there for 72 hours, if you haven't maintained your relationships in the proper fashion of those who love you, you're going to be up Blanks Creek, right? Without a paddle. And this is something that is not conveyed in almost any, except for The Wire, in any media that I have read. Now, granted, I don't read a lot of police procedurals and stuff because I'm more of a science fiction fan.
Sure. Also
because, their experience may be different from mine. Maybe I'm trying to save myself for something I can do that I feel will be fresh and won't be, whatever it may be. But the key is that, one of my favorite scenes in any film is outside of The Wire, because I will talk about The Wire.
That's a great show.
We're both fans.
But outside of The Wire is the modern rendition of Thief.
James Caan?
No, the modern one. There's a more recent one with, what's his name, from the shot his AD on accident. Baldwin.
Yeah,
he did
Alec
one.
Baldwin.
Yeah, he did one where he's him. And anyway, and it's not even him that says anything. It's Rebecca De Mornay is a lieutenant of police. And there is a shooting between a plainclothes officer who's actually in a cocktail dress and has to draw down and shoot somebody and everything. And so does the lieutenant of police, or captain, I can't remember what her rank is. And she kind of turns to this sergeant who's her adjutant and goes, now I know why, all this paperwork's why I know I don't want to shoot anybody again, or something along those lines. It's like, and it addresses in the writing a whole process that would be boring to watch, but you see that it is onerous and difficult and challenging and time consuming simply by this one phrase that also makes her more of a badass, right? It's like, I'd shoot more people, but it's just so much people, right? And while that...
real quick, before we get too more in deep into the weeds, we do need to take a quick break. And obviously, the three of us, we love talking about this kind of stuff. It's super interesting to us. We just love this stuff so much. So anyway, point is, we got to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll get back into it with Griff and nuts and bolts stuff, observations, and little tips and tricks that he can recommend that will help you make your writing better. We'll be right back.
Los Angeles, the 1970s. Disco is king and the nightclubs are full of young, beautiful people with Saturday night fever. From the Sunset Strip to Hollywood Boulevard, a new era is dawning. But below the glitz and glamour, a terrifying darkness lurks. Chloe Mendoza knows darkness. She is a Naguali, a half-demon created by the gods of Central and South America, a child of the Court of Feathers, a group of demigods who ruled Mesoamerica with a bloody fist before the Spanish arrived. Now she is a member of Monster Hunter International's newest team. Business is booming in the City of Angels, but soon Chloe gets a message from the Court of Feathers warning her of a mysterious Dark Master who is building up its power in the region. Whatever it is, it brings death and carnage with it. Time to boogie. On sale now, set in Larry Correia's best-selling Monster Hunter International series comes the electronic advanced reader copy of Monster Hunter Memoirs, Fever, by Larry Correia and Jason Cordova, exclusively from Baen Books. Hardcover available October 2023, anywhere Baen Books are sold.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Okay, at the risk of sounding insensitive, I don't really care about leading too much more, being all pithy and stuff for the sake of the listeners, because I kind of just want to talk more about this stuff because I love it. So, Griff, let's talk more about a lot of the things that people get wrong. And I'll let you lead about what you want to talk about because you have a lot more experiences. You have definitely way more experience than either Larry and I put together have.
So let's talk about... I'm an ignoramus. I know gritty cop shows.
Yeah, it's totally the same thing, right, Griff?
I don't know. I haven't been playing yet.
Oh, man.
What, $1,000 a seat? Who can? Holy crap, I wouldn't do that.
That was wonderful. that much money could be raised for seats in your game. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
No, but my law enforcement background consists of getting hired and then laid off before the academy started. I don't know if I've ever told you that. So I've never been anything. All
right, so... Okay, speaking of, Gritty Cop Show. Whole point of Gritty Cop Show is TV tropes, basically.
Yeah, so I'm hitting that stuff that's like not real, but it's the things that people take for granted as cheesy real.
Right. So for you, Griff, what are a lot of these things that people just butcher in their fiction? And you're like, oh, come on, guys. Like, this isn't even hard.
Yeah. One of the biggest things, it actually is kind of like A to Z. It literally is like... The initial encounter, usually they never get on the radio to say that they're there. Uh-huh. So how does anybody know they're there? They never advise a sergeant, hey, I may need you here. And then when it goes south and they get into a fight or whatever, they're never desperate on the radio. I have literally yelled on the radio, I don't hear sirens! Because I was hoping that my backup would be there very quickly when I was wrestling with a guy who was my size on PCP.
Oh, jeez.
Alone. And he was doing one-arm cop push-ups with 180 pounds of meat on his back going, stop resisting. I don't hear sirens. But the combat concludes, and the very first thing you have to do is render aid if you've done damage.
Correct.
So, standing over the body with a smoking gun and going, oh, there's another one done or whatever, that's not going to happen.
Witty catchphrase.
Yes, exactly. Whatever it may be, that's not what happens unless you want to not have a job and be in prison yourself.
Yeah, that's going to look good on the badge camp. Stick around.
Right. Hang out while you're hanging from something, yeah. But the specifics of it is it's all well and good, right? If it's in service of the story, I totally understand. It's when they get into multiple engagements in 1 hour long thing, where they've talked to their sergeant and then they're still using the same weapon that they engaged the first one with, because you have to actually
that's evidence.
Turn that evidence over, get a new gun if they don't think that you acted out of line right in the initial investigation. Depending on your jurisdiction, there's a whole raft of investigative bodies, including civilian bodies, including people that are really out to get you. Yeah. And that may be your frenemy on the internal affairs board who really wants to, hang out Officer Barber or whoever it might be out to dry. So there's that. And then the real spot and the real space, which is most difficult to write, but also the most rewarding, is the aftermath. The aftermath of extreme violence leaves its mark. And it leaves its physical mark, it leaves requirements for physical therapy, etc. One person may be taking a dirt nap. The other person, and if it's an officer, they're going to have to live with what they had to do. And again, it used to be before 2020, 2021, I got asked a lot, ever get to shoot someone? And that offended me. It's morally offensive.
Yeah, that's a poor phrasing for a very personal question.
And but also, it is putting that's something that you want to do.
Exactly.
And it also puts in the question on the officer, that's something you joined the department to do.
Correct.
And none of that is correct.
Exactly.
There are.
And I've known, because my background, I've known a lot of people. I mean, I've never killed anybody,
Right.
knock on wood. But I've known a lot of people who have, just because of the background I come from. And one thing I discovered over the years is people are wildly different
Yes.
in how they deal with that. And some people are just wired in such a way that it's just a thing.
Right. And it may be a thing for 5 years, 10 years,
Yeah.
15
And
years.
then it hits you.
They might wake up one night and go, whoa.
Yeah, and then there's other dudes where it messes them up.
Yes.
And there's other dudes who they're downright scary.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so, and Steve knows one of the guys I'm thinking of, and this guy is kill more people than cancer, and he's just like,
Yeah.
and it's my job. And so it's a very interesting psychology there, where there's but the TV shows, it tends to be like a very flippant thing.
Right.
Like,
And it has to be because the show has to continue, right?
right.
So-
Because it's not a psychodrama.
Right. Right. And that's the same for your fiction. So if you're trying to write, the cool action adventure, that's great. And all you have to do to satisfy jerks like me is drop a line in there. And one of the things I did in Second Chance Angel with Casey Azell was I dropped a line in there about I'm not going to. He drops a body, right? He's doing a raid. He's trying to save his love, and he goes in. He pops a guy, and he goes, "I'm not going to think about that." As he steps over him, because he's not going to think about it, because you can't think about it in that moment. Otherwise, that's how you get dead.
He doesn't have time for any of that processing
he doesn't
right
have
now.
anything, and it's not to say he's not feeling it. It's not to say that he's not going to pay a price later.
Yeah.
So that buys me like all the credit. Like I'm in, man, because you are acknowledging that this is going to have a cost.
Yep.
And whether that cost is simply that you're approached by your friends or your peers, like, why doesn't this bother you? Because that is its own cost. If the guy, every time the guy looks at me, I go, this guy's killed a lot of people. Because you actually get to a point where you're like, oh, I get that in your gaze.
Yeah.
And that's a cost. That's a human cost. And one of the things that people aren't aware of with the use of force is, and that is actually accurate about these TV shows, is the more times you do it, the more times you will do it. Mm-hmm. Because you recognize the predicate events. You recognize those things that have happened that will, oh, that's a danger cue, oh, back.
Yeah.
And immediately you recognize the fact that, again, through your experience, you've done it before, and you recognize all the events that are leading up to that same situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I know Steve actually this year got to go take a little bit of training on that. And it was just a very basic training thing. So it's the kind of stuff you're seeing every day, but it's the picking, the pulling, the grooming, all these little tells.
Yard stare.
The method in which they're approaching you from various angles, cutting off various other angles.
Because humans, we're just kind of like violent monkeys a lot of time, and we'll start to exhibit these very basic
the more
behaviors.
Jacked up with adrenaline we are, the more we are monkeys.
Yeah.
That lizard brain takes over. And that's why we train so hard to have these responses, so that we overcome at least the negative aspects of those lizard responses.
Right. And so you're seeing this every day, and so you're getting conditioned, and it's like, okay, this dude, when I see a guy acting this way, he's loading up to do a bad thing.
And the FBI stats bear out that an officer who gets involved in one shooting is like 75% more likely to get involved in another. And it's not because they want to. It's because they went there once.
Yeah.
They recognized the event. They survived the event. And therefore, they are more likely to recognize the event and survive the next event.
Yeah. He's not bloodthirsty. He's just alert.
No, that's a fantastic way to put that.
They're conditioned by their survival to survive again, which is a beautiful animal trait for our continued survival, right?
Correct.
So, but that leads to, this officer, when the media gets a hold of this officer was involved in 4 shootings in 10 years.
He's out of control.
He's out of control.
That's one of the things that actually Michael Conley touches on in Bosch, because Bosch is that guy.
Yeah, he's that guy. And we had a couple of those guys in the San Francisco Police Department as well. Captain Cluster is what we'd call them on occasion, because it wasn't just shootings, but violent events would seem to kick off around them, not because they were, but because they recognized it. So acknowledging that in your writing, and acknowledging that there's going to be an enormous amount of paperwork, acknowledging that at least in the United States and in most countries, there's an adversarial relationship between anybody who's involved in any shooting and the investigators, because they are required to make sure that that was a lawful engagement.
Yeah.
Well, and also acknowledging the fact that quite frequently, especially after a lethal engagement, most cops they're voluntold to go chill at home for a second.
Oh no, it's actually I believe they've tried to make it federal.
Exactly.
And that is a good thing.
For sure.
But only if, at least for the officer, it's only a really good thing if you're actually given services in that time. They come and they talk to you about what happened, and they also talk to your fellow officers about what happened.
There's a political angle to this too, because Steve and I have a good friend, and I think you might know him as well. I won't name him on, but he wound up in an issue with his department where it was an excessive force,
right?
And it was total crap because it was politically motivated, and everybody who was an expert on the subject. I mean, when he came to trial, he had like 1,000 years of experience of his expert witnesses saying, "No, this is bullcrap."
Right.
He could have shot the guy and didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, some of that can be lawful but awful. Again,
Yep.
It's lawful, but boy, it looks really bad. And again, the standard for use of force is would an officer of similar training and experience have acted the same way given the similar set of circumstances?
Yeah. Over on the civilian side, we talk about the reasonable man.
Right.
Ability,
Yes.
opportunity, immediate threat. It's
Right.
just, yeah.
And so with regard to that, and that officer, that deputy,
Yeah, we know the same guy.
Yeah.
the two of us would probably respond differently given that our experience base is different. And also, one of the things that factor into this, and this is one of the things that I don't see enough of in author stuff, is that in books, is that the small officer can get violent a lot faster than me. I'm 6 foot. I'm 250. I can't go violent as quickly as someone say as Casey Azell, who's I believe 5'6", and we're going to say barely 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Right. She can't get violent
Oh.
anyway. She can get violent so much faster than me because she's having to deal with a much larger suspect. So if she gets punched in the face by that person, the jury will eventually go, well, yeah, that's a lethal assault.
That's understandable.
The immediacy of the threat is much more
grave.
Is much more grave for her.
I have a friend
or
who-
any person that's of that size.
Right.
I have a friend who Steve has met as well, and he's bigger than me.
Right.
He's real close to me. But he's a police detective in Texas now.
Right.
And so Steve knows something. Wonderful, gentle guy, nice guy. But one time we were at a training thing, and there's a bunch of cops, and they're telling stories about fights they'd been in. And they come to Matt, and Matt is 6'6", probably 300 pounds, big hands of stone looking dude.
His hands are the size of
So he's basically my
face.
size. And they get to Matt, and this other cop's talking about all the things, and he goes, "How many you been in?" Because the little guy, the 150-pound guy, had been in like dozens. You get to Matt, and Matt's like, "None."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Serious? But you're from such and such," which is a notoriously dangerous place. And
Right.
he's like, they see me unfold out of the car,
Right.
and they look at me and they say, "Nah."
not food.
Well, see, he didn't have enough PCP users in his area. So
he had a lot of crack. He didn't have a lot of.
Well, and if you get enough guys with the short man complex, you will get more fights. But so as a pointer to authors, the shorter you make your protagonist officer, the more likely you can get violent.
Oh, yeah.
So if they're a little munchkin, they can open the can a lot faster than the big giant that everybody wants to write.
We talk about the TV shows that get stuff wrong, and Blue Bloods is a cheesy show,
Oh
but there's
my
a
gosh.
line in it, right? Because it's Tom Selleck.
Right.
And Tom Selleck's a big dude, especially for his day.
Him and his mustache.
And he was there with his kid, played by Donnie Wahlberg, who's like a little dude. And Donnie Wahlberg's talking about having to use a sap on a guy, and Tom Selleck's like, "I never have to do anything." And he's like, "Dad, look at you! You're 6'4" with hands of stone. Who's gonna mess with you? Of course you didn't have to use,
Right.
It just-
and also like it depends on the population you're dealing with too. So like you are a large mammal. I would treat you differently than I treat Diamond. So, but I would treat you much differently, and also knowing what I know about you, I would also treat you very differently, given your gun expertise. Right? I would be like, okay, I'm not really worried about hand to hand with you.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
worried about getting
Watch the hands and belt line.
Yeah, exactly. So
Is Larry going fig leaf on you? Because if he is, that's a bad deal.
exactly.
Yeah, I win races, man. That's what I do.
Exactly. So, and congratulations on your light pen.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
So when it comes to writing this stuff, acknowledge that there is an aftermath acknowledge that, the size makes a difference. And that's what she said, right? Yeah.
Physics makes sense.
Physics makes sense, and it's really important to get that aspect right. You have to in order to not throw jerks like me out of the story, you have to at least acknowledge it. And it doesn't have to be like a long dissertation about, this is that, da, 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 da. But if you throw in a line or two that indicate, she looked up at the suspect, and he was stepping forward, and she wasn't even sure why she did it, but the gun was in her hand all of a sudden, and it was on like Donkey Kong.
Yeah, when the ground shook when he put his ponderous boot down.
Exactly.
I have a question for you, Griff. When it comes to in the writing stuff, and this is totally selfish because this is what the next book that I'm writing. So when it comes to illustrating how an officer can react to situations where there is a high quality or a high quantity of unknown. Okay, I think it's fairly common knowledge that some of the most dangerous things that a cop can ever respond to: domestics, traffics, right? Traffic stops. Okay, so there's so much
reasons.
Exactly, but there's so much unknown. Like okay, so the genesis of my question was, if I'm approaching Larry, it's very different than you're approaching me, especially if I know what I know about Larry.
Right.
But what if you don't know? How are you illustrating points like that within your fiction?
Well, one of the things that was frequently said is that if you were to take San Francisco police officers and put them policing LA, there would be riots. And if you were to take LAPD up to San Francisco and have them police San Francisco, there would be riots. LA has a strategy and a training regimen where everybody gets treated exactly the same, and it's not friendly. Mm-hmm. It's really, and if you shoot your mouth off or at the least bit squirrely, there will be repercussions. San Francisco is like, say whatever you want to say, but don't make those moves. Mm-hmm. So there is a structure to the way your particular department, your fictional department, is trained, and how will they have been trained. And so going to your local officers, talking to somebody, I'm always available. You can, hit me up.
Yeah, he's going to want to use you as a consultant on his next one.
Right.
Like seriously.
But talk about it. Try and find out the specifics of how it might be handled, and always just give that. It's just like research on anything, right? You may know 600 things. Drop the ones that are pertinent into that thing, and what you know in a domestic violence situation is almost always a known quantity.
Repeat offenders.
Every family that gets into that kind of thing, but the unknown quantity in that is this the last time?
Yep, absolutely.
And you never try and arrest anybody in the kitchen because that's it's weapon central.
All the stabby stuff is.
The stabby stuff is there. But also likewise, there's other places that have all sorts of spiky, crazy stuff in them as well. But traffic stops, they are actually relatively controlled if done properly. We have lots and lots of experience in doing them as safely as possible. Also, you are free to move to cover, free to return fire, etc. They are hopefully still in that car. It's as soon as you start getting people out of the car, and some jurisdictions do this all the time on almost every stop, they pull people out of the car. So, again, address it, and you really shouldn't have too much trouble if you are aware of wherever your setting is, or if you're making it up from whole cloth. What are their policies and procedures? What are their directives? I was talking to a Coastie last night that we all know, and that Coastie was like, hey, after 9/11, our priorities switched from, Homeland Security was number 4. Number 1 was rescue and recovery operations, and we went, 4 to 1. That's a humongous change. So if you know the directives of your department, your fictional department, or your fictional treatment of a department, you're going to know okay, this is where this guy went wrong. This is where this officer's dirty. or this is where this officer's misunderstood.
I need to get you to listen to Lost Planet Homicide and critique it, like for real. Well, because it's a fictional world and it's a colony planet, and so I was able to like have complete freedom with the culture that I came up with.
Wanted to create as Griff was saying, create your own policies and procedures.
Yeah, and it also is one
within
step
the
above a
world.
third world nation.
Right.
Well, no, it's not. It's below. It's bad.
So
It's like fifth world.
So when I got in, the general orders, the most recent general order, and it was 250 pages. The most recent general order was like 1993, and I got in 2000. But every one of those general orders has somebody's name attached, and there's a story behind that. Like, thou shalt not put your loaded shotgun in the rack. Why is that? Because there was a squad car with a hole in the top of the squad car, and Robbie the Robot light bars hanging on either side when the slug went off and blew open the top of the thing and blew off and literally, I know the guy whose name is attached to that, right? So, and so when you're making it up, think of that kind of thing. Like, what are these stories? And then what are the laws? And then how are the laws actually law and order? So when the judge gets a hold of it, or the AI who's sitting in judgment on things, how do they make those judgments? Because if it's an AI and there's no witnesses except for the video, how are they organizing their parameters for the court case?
Correct.
So, and the rights and options of stuff, which is, somebody who's written the book that you did, if you can extrapolate to a Jovian republic that has kind of a similar mindset, you can really play around with that.
So what I want to keep from screwing stuff up to is I made a fairly lawless, very, very almost like Mexico City level bribery and corruption, and so that way, like,
There's
I violate
one law there.
So that's why basically I violate the crap out of the laws all the time, because honestly, as a writer, it gave me quite a bit of, I was immune from like screwing stuff up. Because people can't really be like, it doesn't work that way. I was like, well, A, I made it up, and B, it's broken anyway.
And the beauty of that is okay, so now there's a new sheriff in town.
Yeah.
And when you decide you want to do it, you can.
Yeah, and so basically I wrote one of those guys who's the cluster.
Right.
He's the guy. He's that guy.
Yeah.
I think you'll like them. They're super good.
Cool.
Yeah,
I look forward to it.
Yeah, just I'd be curious just to get your feedback. But
yeah,
dude, Griff, that's some awesome stuff. We need to have this again. We need to do like I know we don't have time now because we got like this con and there's so many people we need to talk to, but we need to have you on again to talk about this some more because there's so many aspects to this because that's such a big part of fiction.
Yeah, my gosh.
I mean, it's got its own genre.
And
but
just the kind of last thing that for me is that my partner for 6 years, great guy, collegiate wrestler, top of his game at a prestigious university, known for wrestling. One of the things I was whining to him one day about how, the damn firemen get off light every time. It's just the heroes, the heroes get off light. He's like, you know what, Griff? They don't make movies about them. Right? There's like one movie about firefighters.
Yeah, you're right.
There's like there's thousands about it.
And
about
TV
us.
hours, how many
Yeah.
thousands of TV hours are there? And it's because people find it fascinating.
Well, it's compelling.
It can make for compelling TV.
Yeah, I mean, just the idea of, gosh, Casey and I were talking about this on her show the other day. The idea, especially when you kind of mix it with some of the noir tendencies, which I know you love too, Griff.
Oh, yeah.
The idea of this, almost tarnished knight that goes about his business. He's willing to maybe take it a step further than other people, so that other people can afford to be good.
Right.
And there's something super compelling about that in your fiction.
Well, it's every officer is a sheepdog, except for the wolves, and you don't want any wolves in there.
Yeah.
So you get rid of those as soon as you can, as soon as you identify them. But every officer wants to be a sheepdog. If they're true to their calling, they want to be a sheepdog.
Interesting. All right. I think that's the best way to end this episode. Griff, thank you so much for making time for us.
No problem. I really enjoyed it.
It's the schedules are all wonky and stuff, but thank you so much for coming on the show. We love you, buddy. Thank you so much. Okay. We'll see you on the next one. This is the WriterDojo. Take it easy.
WriterDojo is Steve Diamond and Larry Correia. Produced by Jack Wilder and Bear and Hare Studios. Theme song, Word Mercenaries by Craig Nybo. New episodes come out every Wednesday wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/WriterDojo, by leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on the Writer Dojo, email ads@writerdojo.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to questions@writerdojo.com.
Hey, want to come see our shovel and tarp collection?